These are the major Hawaiian islands. There's 8 of them, home to a combined 1.45 million people, and are visited by up to 10 million tourists every year. The beauty and climate in this tropical paradise have drawn plenty of attention towards Hawaii, but not in an equal way. Looking at this population density map of the islands, we can see an overwhelming amount of people on Oahu, Hawaii's 3rd largest island by area, and barely any people living anywhere else. The population of Oahu as of 2024 is about 1 million people, a significantly larger figure than the Big Island's 200,000, Maui's 164,000, or the meager 84,000 on the rest of the 5 islands combined. Oahu's population density is an astounding 1,704 people per square mile, which is roughly equal to that of Taiwan's for comparison. All in all, it translates to Oahu just 9% of Hawaii's landmass, containing 70% of the population overall. But how did this come to be, while the rest of the islands have remained quite rural? And better yet, how did Hawaii even become so populated in the first place? Well, it's estimated that the Hawaiian Isles remained relatively unpopulated up until around 1000 AD, when Polynesian seafaring explorers from further west in the Pacific discovered the islands. These first native Hawaiians established chiefdoms that ruled over their respective islands. Societies across the islands utilized a caste system of social hierarchy and depended on fishing, gardening, and agriculture to sustain their gradual growth in population. Throughout this long period, lasting until the mid-18th century, Hawaiians formed a distinct culture and identity, centered around the concept of lokahi, which emphasized harmony, unity, and agreement within community and nature. By the mid-18th century, an estimated 150,000 to 300,000 inhabitants lived across the islands under chiefdoms. It wasn't until 1778 that the first European explorer, Captain James Cook of Britain, made contact with Hawaii, and the event represented a quick shift in the political and social structure Hawaii had maintained for centuries. Cook's initial exploration of the islands introduced natives to firearms and launched a period of instability and violence amongst the chiefdoms. Eventually, by 1795, the battles ended and all of the Hawaii Islands became unified under one king, Kamehameha the Great. Kamehameha and his dynasty would last for nearly the next 100 years, but the cultural landscape for native Hawaiians would suffer dramatic setbacks as European contact became part of everyday life. After news of Cook's discoveries and books recounting his voyages made their way to the rest of Eurasia and North America, Hawaii became a hotspot for traders, businessmen, and explorers, with the first Western company, a sugar plantation, Ladd & Co., opening in 1835. Along with these opportunity seekers came a wide variety of new diseases, including influenza, smallpox, measles, and leprosy that shrunk the native population significantly. By 1870, the population of native Hawaiians had evaporated to a mere 50,000. In addition to physical detriments, wave after wave of Christian missionaries altered the spiritual culture of Hawaii dramatically. Conversion among native Hawaiians was strong, and thus the cultural identity of native Hawaii grew weaker with time. Nevertheless, Kamehameha's lineage continued to rule the islands up until 1874, when Kamehameha V suddenly died but had not yet named an heir to the throne. Political turmoil resulted in sporadic violence across the islands. To aid in ending the violence, and perhaps to use the lapse in leadership as a political opportunity, the United States and British sent in military units to keep peace. Soon after, King Kalakaua was elected to rule Hawaii and was forced into signing a Hawaiian constitution that had been drafted exclusively by American and British settlers and businessmen. This constitution effectively disintegrated native control over the islands. In 1891, King Kalakaua passed away and his sister, Liliuokalani, replaced him on the throne. The queen made it her utmost priority to re-establish native control over their lands. To do so, she drafted a new constitution and proclaimed an absolute monarchy again. This action was met with US and British military presence, a treason trial for the queen in 1892, and ultimately a coup led by US and European businessmen who claimed the throne back in 1893. The group of businessmen behind the coup, named the Committee of Safety, elected Stanford B. Dole to be the provisional president of the islands. Stanford Dole, a cousin to James Dole, owner of the Dole Food Company, sought the annexation of Hawaii to the US to support the company's enterprise, which we'll get into in a bit. By 1898, as expansionist President William McKinley took office in Washington and Grover Cleveland, a supporter of Queen Liliuokalani, finished his term, Hawaii inevitably was annexed to the United States. It became an official US-governed territory, despite strong opposition from native populations. By 1900, under its own US territorial self-governance, Hawaii's landscape became almost entirely dedicated to the sugar and fruit industries. Whole islands were exclusively used for a few businesses, such as the Dole Company, and population growth on these islands was therefore extremely limited. On Niihau, Hawaii's westernmost island, the entire island was, and still is, privately owned by Aubrey Robinson and his descendants, who dedicated the entire island to sugarcane plantation. Additionally, the Dole Company owned around 98% of Lanai and dedicated all their land to pineapple and other fruit plantations. The period of the early 20th century in Hawaiian history was categorized by extreme land grabs by wealthy tycoons, and much of these early purchases are still owned by a select few individuals today. Nonetheless, Hawaii became a business haven for the super rich in the early 20th century, and upcoming global conflicts would cause even further investment and population growth, specifically on Oahu. Speaking of good investment, I'd like to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. With over 3,200 different servers in over 100 locations, you're able to virtually change your IP address and place yourself wherever in the world you'd want to be. This is completely safe too. In fact, Surfshark uses top-grade encryption and complies with the strictest security measures. When you're using one of their features known as camouflage mode, not even your internet service provider would know you're using a VPN. But besides that, they don't collect your personal information or online activities, while simultaneously protecting your data while using public Wi-Fi. With just one account, you can use it on an unlimited amount of devices. Yes, unlimited. So right now, if you use our discount code VERST, like the link below, or even just use this QR code here, Surfshark is offering 4 months free. Don't worry if you're not sure of it either, because they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's absolutely no risk. In fact, there's more risk in not using a VPN while traveling than trying this out. Anyways, another motive for annexing Hawaii was its strategic location. As the US expanded, adding new territories at home and abroad, Guam and the Philippines were now US realms that required military protection. Both Guam and the Philippines were across the entire Pacific, and for naval fleets to reach these lands, a midway military port would need to be created. Hawaii's central location in the Pacific showed excellent promise, and the greatest opportunity for a port of all the islands was at Pearl Harbor in Oahu. This is because Pearl Harbor is the largest and deepest natural harbor of all the islands. It features deep waters that can easily house massive military vessels, and the lagoon home to Pearl Harbor has only one entrance to the ocean, meaning any naval attacks on Pearl Harbor would have to come from only one point. So in 1875, the Kingdom of Hawaii and the US signed the Reciprocity Treaty of 1875, which in a later extension, the US negotiated for exclusive use of the lands in the area known as Pu'uloa, which were later used for the Pearl Harbor Naval Base. But Pearl Harbor wasn't the only ideal harbor location along Oahu's southern coast. Honolulu's waterfront just a few miles east proved perfect to be another harbor destination for commerce. It's southward facing, making it much easier to trade for a multitude of reasons. See, in many parts of the world, including Hawaii, prevailing winds blow from the east or northeast. A south-facing harbor is naturally shielded from these winds, making it calmer and safer for ships to dock and unload cargo without being battered by strong winds or rough seas. It's the same thing with tropical storms and hurricanes in the Pacific. They typically track from the north or northwest, so a south-facing harbor is less exposed to direct storm surges or high waves, reducing damage risks to ships and coastal infrastructure. A calm and well-protected harbor encouraged trade, creating ideal conditions for the Honolulu harbor to become the most commercially important port in Hawaii, as well as for a large civilization to grow near it. Naturally, for these reasons, Honolulu was also the capital of Hawaii, a title it held since it was first named the capital by the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1850. This brought a large concentration of government jobs and services to the city, which contributed to the population imbalance. As an island, Oahu has a natural aquifer system unique among all the others. There are massive underground freshwater resources, completely unmatched by the other sometimes drought-prone neighbor islands. All the main islands get a fair amount of rainfall, but none have the natural storage mechanism of Oahu's aquifers. This water is among the cleanest anywhere, having been purified through years of draining downward through soil and volcanic rock. It's the source of water for many wells and springs, providing approximately 90% of Oahu's drinking water. These conditions, combined with an influx of government investments to build up the area, naturally saw American populations shoot up on Oahu, as the other islands, with either private ownership or less than favorable living conditions, saw minimal growth. In the 1920s, Hawaii's population returned to its pre-colonization high estimate of 300,000, but now most inhabitants were Americans in the military or business. The native population around the same time had dwindled to just 20,000. By 1940, the population of Hawaii had grown to 425,000. But so too grew concerns about Hawaiian safety as Japanese expansionism in East Asia continued. In fear of Japanese invasion of US Pacific territories, and to protect both Hawaii and mainland US, Pearl Harbor became the US Navy headquarters in 1940. A year later though, the Japanese launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor and brought the US into World War II. News of the attack rang around the country and the world, and the prominence of Oahu's Pearl Harbor was solidified forever. Despite suffering losses of 2,400 in the attacks, the US won the Pacific side of the war, while Pearl Harbor remained a key base for aerial and marine warfare. And in the conflicts that would follow World War II, including the Korean War and Vietnam War, Pearl Harbor would remain a pivotal military base for the US Navy operation. As residents of Hawaii recognized the importance of their islands for both business and military use, a massive push for statehood swept the state in the 1950s. Statehood would provide Hawaii with greater funding, representation in Congress, and electoral votes. By 1959, Hawaii was granted statehood as the 50th state of the Union, and Honolulu, already boasting over 250,000 people, became the state's capital. In the years that have followed since 1959, Hawaii's population has more than doubled from around 600,000 to 1,450,000 today. Additionally, Hawaii's economy has experienced a dramatic shift, from agricultural plantations centered around sugar and fruit production to tourism, which is now a dominant player in Hawaii's GDP. Hawaiian tourists, which amass 9 to 10 million visitors a year, spent $20.7 billion in Hawaii in 2023. 5.6 million of these visitors went to Oahu, which obviously houses Hawaii's largest airports and transportation infrastructure. In the relative present day though, there's more additional reasons people go to Oahu outside of just the benefits of its geography. For example, the most famous attraction in Hawaii is arguably Waikiki Beach, which too is in Oahu. It was historically a retreat for Hawaiian royalty because of how perfect it was, especially for things like surfing, which is a large cultural part of Hawaii. Speaking of, Duke Kahanamoku, a native Hawaiian who's known as the father of surfing because of how he's popularized it, surfed there, making Waikiki the epicenter for the sport's growth. For many people, going to Hawaii is going to Waikiki Beach or Pearl Harbor. It's no wonder that modern-day Hawaii is characterized by Oahu almost entirely. Like I said before, of Hawaii's total land area, Oahu accounts for only 9%. But conversely accounts for roughly 70% of Hawaii's total population, hence its nickname, the Gathering Place. As shown throughout Oahu's history and its beneficial geography, there have been plenty of reasons for the population to grow on the island. But why haven't any of the other islands seen substantial growth too? What factors might be limiting them? Well, 3 main factors contribute to low populations on the rest of the islands: freshwater access and rainfall, topography, and private or government land ownership. Being islands in the middle of the ocean, freshwater access is critical to survival. While all the Hawaiian islands experience some freshwater rainfall, a few islands experience it far more than others. Low-elevation islands such as Molokai, Lanai, Niihau, and Kahulawi have drier conditions and less rainfall per year, which limits drinking water sustainably for larger populations. On the other hand, islands like Maui, Kauai, and Hawaii, the Big Island, see plenty of rainfall each year, but have limited flat landscape to develop on. Most of Maui's population lives in its low-elevation center, but very few live in the rugged east and west. On Hawaii, massive peaks fill the center of the island, and only a bit of flat plainland can be populated on the east and west sides. Kauai, with a smaller area but a rugged topography, offers very little flat land for development as well. Finally, private ownership of Hawaii by a handful of rich individuals prevents the creation of new communities or towns across Hawaii. As previously mentioned, Niihau today is entirely privately and government-owned, and Lanai, although under new ownership by Larry Ellison of Oracle Corporation, is still 98% privately owned. Mark Zuckerberg has purchased nearly 2,000 acres in Kauai to build a retreat, and Oprah Winfrey continually buys acreages of land on Maui. As of 2024, 11% of private land in Hawaii is owned by just 37 billionaires, making it difficult for new population centers to grow throughout the state. Additionally, the federal and Hawaiian governments own a combined 39% of land, meaning just half of Hawaii is owned by the people of it. Land across all the islands has been continuously reserved for a few rich business owners and for the government, with very little space available for locals or small-scale investment. It's worth noting as well, the entire island of Kuhalawi since the 1990s has been devoted to nature conservation, but only after years of war in the mid-20th century, where Kahulawi served as a military testing and firing ground. The island to this day is littered with bombs and debris, thus making it uninhabitable for humans. It's the only Hawaiian island with a population of 0. Many islands overall have stricter regulations aimed at preserving natural beauty and local culture. Considering the factors above, Oahu, being urbanized and densely populated with optimal geographical and meteorological climates, has managed to draw a vast majority of Hawaiian residents. The mountains on Oahu are just high enough to sustain rainy weather patterns that keep fresh drinking water sources on the island, and the landscape still offers plenty of flat terrain centered around Honolulu and Pearl Harbor for human expansion. The strong historical demand to build up Pearl Harbor and create a subsidiary city for commerce nearby has skyrocketed Oahu's population, and the extreme privatization trend across the islands has largely stayed away from Honolulu and Oahu due to its extreme density. All things considered, for being a small dot in the ocean, Oahu is certainly anything but. Naturally, this brings out different problems, because it's made the cost of living on the island extremely expensive. For many residents of Hawaii, or at least former residents who had to leave because of the costs, the phrase "priced out of paradise" is a somber reminder to the situation they found themselves in. But that's a whole nother story. Thank you for watching, and again, thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to try it for 4 months free using my link in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.